Welcome to mdo204, Class 1, 3D Techniques for Nuke Compositors. In this course, we'll be covering 3 shots from the Virgin Galactic spec spot directed by Michael Chance. You might remember his name from the After Effects course AFX 215, where he directed a short film for that called Project Arbiter. So in these first 3 courses, we're going to look at how we can set up a realistic Earth rig inside of Modo. Now you can get some pretty decent results inside of Modo. Whether you use it for previs or final render, that's up to you. With a little bit of elbow grease and hard work, you can get the renders looking pretty realistic and fantastic. And with each new iteration of Modo, the render engine becomes stronger and faster and just looks better and better. So hopefully this will lay some groundwork for you to get some really cool results. Please post them in the forums as either works in progress or final renders, because I'd love to give you guys feedback, and hopefully through that we'll all be able to grow and learn together. So let's jump right into Modo and get started. So here we are inside of Modo, and obviously one of the things that we want to do if we're creating Earth rig is we need a sphere. So I can come over to my sphere tool here, and I can shift click and create a sphere. I'm just going to undo that and show you the difference in the different sphere options that we have here. So under sphere mode, we have a few different options that we can do, and I'm just going to go start from the bottom up and show you what they do. Tessellation, if I click, that'll set down a point, and I can control and drag out and then drag out from there. And with this tool live, I can reposition it in real time, rescale that to be even. I can even enter in different sub D levels for this sphere. And once I hit spacebar and drop that tool, we now have this sphere, and this is really good for creating really round symmetrical items. And we can see that this is actually has sub D applied to it. If we zoom in and hit tab, we can see that this whole item with sub D applied to it is going to be very smooth. So I'm going to delete this model really quick and show you a few different spheres, but before I do that, I want to show you the proper way to delete things so you're not leaving behind vertices. So if I was in polygon mode with this model selected and I was to hit backspace, it would look like it's gone. But if I were to come to vertices and select this area, we can see that I have tons of floating verts, and that's not what we want. I could then delete these vertices, but I just want to remind you that if you want to delete the actual model and the verts with your model selected, you're going to want to hit delete. If you hit backspace, that's going to leave vertices behind. The other thing you could do is with your model selected, if I hit Alt-1, that'll convert it to the vertices. And then I could hit backspace, and that'll actually delete the model, because without any verts, there's no polygons to draw between those verts. So let me come back to the sphere tool, and let's look at quad ball. And I'm going to hold Control Shift this time and drag out a quad ball. And if I turn down the sub Ds on this quad ball, we basically get something like this. Now if I hit tab now to unsubdivide this so it's not a sub D model, we can see that all this is just a square. So if I were to hit D a few times to subdivide that model, we're getting something a little bit better, but it's not a perfect sphere, and it's just not what we want. So coming back to this sphere, we also have a globe. And I'm just going to shift click and bring in this globe and hit A to center this. And if I hit tab, we can see how it's subdividing this model to be a subdivision surface. But I want to point out the top here. So this is going to be a problem for us having all of these come into a vert in the center. If I hit tab, you can see that it's basically coned on the top, and once this becomes a subdivision surface, it almost has a flat-like structure to it. And that will create some odd shapes. However, I am going to use this as a starting point, whereas something like tessellation would be best. That would require us to do the most UV work on this model. And what we're trying to do is make something fast and that will look good. And one of the tricks that we can do is just position or rotate our textures on top of this model so we will never see or have this area in the shot. And at a distance, it's not going to be too shabby. And so if we have our camera set up like this, basically what we're going to do is then rotate our model so we would never see those polar coordinates, and then rotate the texture around it. And that's just a really cheap, fast way of doing it. So we have our UVs basically already set up for this model. I'll hit M and call this Earth. That way it applies a material to it. If I click on UV here, the UV tab, we can see that basically this is exactly what we're going to want for our model. So I'm going to come back to model here. Get myself right side up. I'm going to go over to this mesh item and just delete it and rename this one, oops, Earth. So what we could do is copy this, hit N for a new mesh item, call this one clouds, and literally just paste that right in. And I'm going to hit R and scale this up just a tad. Then I'm going to control copy that. And while I have that selected, I'm going to hit M and call this clouds. Make this a different color. So we have that. Hit N for new mesh item. And I'm going to call this one atmosphere. And paste those in. And scale that one up as well. And make a new material called atmosphere. And I'll just change this to a different color. So if I turn these off, and we can see that I have my Earth, my clouds, and my atmosphere, and each one of these is slightly bigger than the other. So this is exactly what we want right now. I'm going to come over to my render tab and hit A to center this. And one of the things that I want to do is come over to the render item itself over here, and we can set up our project. So I'm going to just type in 2048 by 1080 at 72 dots per inch. And we can always change this later, but this will basically set our aspect ratio and frame size the way we want it. That way when we're in the model tab, if I come over to camera, I'll actually see the framing. And this works for all of the different tabs across Modo. It's just an easy way to help us visualize what we're doing. So really quickly, while I'm still on the spheres, I want to show you a few easy ways to create this. You could always shift click, which will create a new mesh item. with the perfect sphere inside of it. The other thing that we could do, let me undo that, is if I click anywhere on my work plane, which is this white work plane here, and then hold Control, I can drag out a perfect circle on my work plane axis. And then if I click again, it'll pull it out into 3D. So one way of working here is I could just come in under my radius and set it here so it's all one size. And if I drop that tool, whoops, if I drop that tool, we'll see that I now have that sphere that was created along the work plane, and it's a perfect circle. Another thing that I could do is, with the sphere selected, I could hold Control and Shift, which is going to just basically pull out a perfect sphere dropped along that work plane, but it's going to be uniform, which is a really nice way to work. And then if I want to center that, since it's all live, I can come in and just center that out. And actually this brings up a good question of working size. How big do we want this? Well, I can tell you this, I don't know that we want to keep our spheres as small as we have. Basically because if we actually click on Earth, we can see right now that this is not very big. If each square is 2 inches, it's not very big across. What I'm going to do is I'm going to select all of these and come over to Action Center, Origin, make sure that's at the center, and I'm going to scale these up pretty big. And what this will do, this doesn't need to be perfect, but I want it more than a few inches in our scene. So this is going to be a nice bigger scene to work with. If each of these squares now is 50 feet across, we can see that we're working with quite a bit of space here, and this is going to be good for things like dynamics if we ever do this in this scene. And rendering and doing dynamics and volumes accurately so those numbers will add up. Obviously we can't make a globe as big as the Earth. That's just not going to happen in our viewport. That's miles and miles and miles, or kilometers and kilometers and kilometers of space that we don't need to take up, and it would take forever to navigate our scene. So this is going to be good for now. I'm happy with this. Let me just double check. So this will be good, and this will work for what we want to do. So let's make a space background to start with. I'm going to click on the Render tab. I'm going to hit A to bring this into view here. And just center this up a little bit. And under environments, I'm going to add layer, enhanced modo textures, space, and star field. Now right away this doesn't look that good. I'm actually going to pull this down so we can see a little bit more. So what we need to do is come to texture locator. I'm going to click on the circle here to gang this and make this smaller. And then I'm going to come to the texture layer, which is where we're going to have our parameters that we're going to change. And right now I think I'm going to play with lower clip and bring this up. And what that'll do is clip out some of the lower floating point values to create what looks like more of a star field. And actually I'm going to come over to texture locator, gang these up again, and make these even smaller. Maybe something like this actually looks great. So what I can come to is texture locator now, and if I play with my upper clip, it'll basically just make them brighter. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to use bias to kind of dial this in, and then I can use gain as well. So I like the look of this. I'm actually going to pull my clip up a little bit more and try to get a little bit less stars. And this looks good to me. And like that, we have a star field that as we spin around, we're going to have a perfect star field in 3D space. And this is a really great and fast, easy way to do that inside of Modo. So let me just pull this back up here. And this is a good time to save. So I'm going to save my project. Earth rig beginning. Click save. And now we have our file saved. And we have our star field. And we have our 3 different mesh items that we're going to apply textures to. But to apply textures, we need textures. So I'm going to show you 2 websites for things that we may use in this particular scene. One of them is the HDR Labs archive. And what this is it's a archive of spherical maps for you that you can use inside of Modo or any 3D package to relight your scene, because basically it's a HDR image. One of the things I want to show you is the Milky Way that you can actually download and use this to wrap around in your environment. If we take a look at what comes in this, we can see that basically it's a big background image of space. Let me zoom in a little bit. So it's the Milky Way, and it's actually already laid out as a lat long image. So this will wrap nicely around a sphere, or you can use it as a backdrop for space. But I found that this is actually a little bit lower res, and unless if you have a shot that's doing quite intense moves in the actual space scene itself, that the star field that we created will work just fine. The other thing I wanted to show you is visibleearth.nasa.gov. And what this is a site where NASA uploads images, very high-res images of Earth. And we're most interested in the blue marble. So if I click on this, we'll see that I get a whole bunch of reference images that we can use for our Earth. And these are basically high-res scans of Earth that NASA has put together. So the best way to go about this is a few different ways. We have a whole bunch of different settings here. Some of these are different areas of the year, full Earth scans. If we come and go to a different page, actually let's go to the last page. We'll see that we have Earth city lights. We have blue marble clouds. So I'm actually going to open that in a tab. I'm going to open city lights in a tab. I'm going to come back to the first page, see if there's anything here that I like. I'm actually going to open topography in a tab. And let's go with, let's see if we can find April. And here we have April. And we're gonna select this one, and I'll show you what this looks like. So basically, when we select this month, and this comes with topography and bathymetry, which is basically the levels of the ocean, we can see that we have a whole bunch of images here that we can use, and some of these are extremely high res. So I'm just going to click on this one up here, and here's why. These images are broken into different coordinates. We could restitch these or reapply these, but I'm just going to go with this one up here. Either one of these will do. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to actually click on this top one here, and this should load, and you'll get to see what is actually happening here. So you can see that this is super high res, and what this is doing is blending the ocean levels, all the various geography of the Earth, all the different things into one image that we can use. So if I back out, so if I alt click this, it'll actually download this image to be used, which is 183 megabytes. So while that's downloading, I'm going to come over to the clouds, and we can see that we have different clouds here. Same deal where it's split into left and right hemisphere. So I'm just going to alt click on this one so we get one cloud lat long image to use. And then under city lights, if we just click on this, we can see kind of like what we're going to be getting here. So this is large. I'll download this one as well. And then let's take a look at the topology, what this is basically. So this is a good resource for using images for our Earth. And this is actually what I'm going to use for this scene that we're doing, because it's extremely high res images, and this will be good for us. So here we can see the cloud combined, giant cloud, giant map of the clouds that we can use. If we zoom in, we can see that this is pretty high res, and this will work nicely on our Earth. Here's our Earth lights, which is really nice. This will help us out. If we come back here, we can see that I only downloaded an area of the hemisphere here. So if I actually want to use this guy, I might have to restitch this in Photoshop. This might be the one I wanted. I accidentally downloaded this one. So this should be all of them together. So if we open this and see what this looks like. So this is actually, this might be nice to use as a bump map as a starting point. And we can see that we can get a lot of detail in here. So this will help us create a bump map for our geometry. So I'm gonna save this as well. So the next step that I'm going to do is in our folder here, I'm going to create a another folder within it called Earth Images. And basically I'm going to take the images that I downloaded and drop them into here. That way everything's in one nice area for you. And I won't have to go searching through these for my desktop or my downloads folder. I highly recommend you guys do the same, especially if you're copying or sharing your work across a network or something like that. It's just good to keep your images organized. That way we know where they're all at. So now that I have all of my images in my folder that I'm going to be using, I'm going to come over to my clips. I'm going to come over and I'm going to load image, select my different images and click open. And now these are all loaded within my clip bin here. So if I come back to render, I can come to my earth material and I can come under my images, and I'm going to go to world topo bathy, which is the image that we downloaded, and just drop that right in. And this will pop up here in a second. And one of the reasons why we're not seeing it, obviously, is because these two things here, let's just turn this off for now. And here we go. So obviously the clouds and the atmosphere have solid textures, and they're bigger than the Earth right now, which was blocking this. So turning those off, we can just focus on the Earth for now, and if we zoom in, we can see that we get pretty high res results, and it actually looks pretty good. It's going to start to break down a little bit, but actually I'm really happy with this. So this is a good start, and obviously one of the things that we want to do though is not have the specular highlight on the ocean or on the land as much as it is on the ocean. So that's one thing that we're going to focus on for the Earth. And the other thing is dialing in the actual material here and how we want this to look. But before we do that, I'm going to set up my cloud layer. So under cloud, I'm going to come to images and find my cloud and drag that right in there. So with the cloud selected here, right now this image that we brought in is diffuse amount. So I'm actually going to come in and duplicate this and change this to transparency amount. And then click invert. And now we have some nice transparency on these clouds. Actually zoom in and find a good area. We can see that the clouds themselves are actually casting a shadow on the Earth, which is actually realistic and what we want. So that actually gives us a nice cloud coverage currently. There's still a lot of work to do, and quite a few things that we could do to improve and make this look even better. I'm going to zoom in here. And one of the things that we could do is duplicate this yet again, and then come and use this as a bump map. And then in this material itself, we can change the bump amplitude. Which you can see happening here. And actually I'm going to turn that down just a little bit. What I'm also going to do under cloud material is turn off specular. Maybe just take it to 10. And under my earth material, right now I'm going to turn specular off. And what we'll do is we'll use another map to drive the specular here. And actually this is a good start for the Earth. Next class what we'll do is we'll dial in all of these materials and then create our atmosphere from scratch. And we'll do it using the schematic view, using nodes to drive some of our textures. I think it's going to be pretty cool. But for now, I think this is a good stopping point. And we've got basically a nice earth going here. For those of you who are Modo savvy, you might want to start trying to figure out how you're going to adjust and change all of this stuff. Feel free to post anything that you guys do in the forums, because I'd love to see it. And next class, we'll get this thing looking good and hopefully get it ultra realistic, and we'll go from there. Alright guys, hope you had a good time, and I'll see you in the next class.